Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan. And on this Wednesday, October 6th, I got a lot of things to talk about. We continue to have winter weather affecting the state. And we have another low pressure system that'll be moving through the eastern Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula that's going to bring high winds. But we continue to have winter weather preparedness week. And I'll talk about some tips, safety tips that you may want to think about here as we head into the winter season. The Bering Low and the included front has worked its way inland, and it's produced rain and snow. It's also provided a little milder push of air, but initially when it encounters the cold air, especially over the mountains and in the interior of the state, it's led to some moderate to locally heavier snows. The next low will bring high winds to Nikolsky, Dutch Harbor, and Cold Bay as we go through Thursday into Thursday night. And overall, an active progressive weather pattern is going to continue into mid-October, especially the southern half of the state. It seems like every other day or two, we will see a system working in from either the Aleutians and North Pacific up into the Gulf. So here are the current advisories and warnings. Winter weather advisory there up along the south slope of the Alaska Range, and the areas in red are winter storm warnings still in effect until Thursday night, midnight. In the areas to the south, Fairbanks, Tanana are under a winter weather advisory. They're going to see snow there mixed with and then change to rain by Thursday morning and midday. Fairbanks in town could pick up an inch of snow or so, but in the hills surrounding the city, you can see as much as 3 to 5 inches of wet snow. Further south along the Alaska Range, there is a high wind advisory in effect for south winds that could gust as high as 60 miles an hour as this frontal system continues to push inland. And then the winter weather advisory for the northern Susitna Valley, particularly Broad Pass, is still in effect through this evening and early morning, where yet an additional maybe couple inches of snow could fall. Already a few inches of wet snow reported earlier today. Then finally, we have another low that's going to be lifting up through the western central Aleutians and then up into the lower Bering Sea, passing up near St. Paul. And as a result, the frontal system and stronger winds circulating around that low could bring wind gusts as high as 75 to near 80 miles an hour to areas such as Nikolsky and Dutch Harbor, and as a result, a high wind watch has been extended eastward for Cold Bay as we get into later tomorrow and tomorrow night. So keep that in mind as the system will pack a punch. Here are some various webcams from earlier today during the early afternoon. Bethel saw some occasional rain showers today, and could still pick up another half to an inch of rainfall between now and, say, midday on Friday. And then areas up in the Talkeetna Mountains, Broad Pass there was about 2 to 3 inches of wet snow. They are mainly on the grassy areas early this afternoon, and some additional snowfall, maybe an inch or two, could fall yet this evening into the late overnight, but probably about the bulk of it then. And looking at the precipitation, it will tend to let up a bit during the day tomorrow across south central up into the interior, though you're still going to see some snow, especially along and south of the Brooks Range. And as I mentioned, Fairbanks could end up seeing some snow change over to some rain during the day on Thursday. And then Friday, as that low that comes up out of the lower Bering moves into the southwestern interior of the state, it's going to spin up a secondary low up along the northwestern Gulf, and that's going to enhance the rain with the frontal system there all the way from the east side of the Kenai through Prince William Sound up into the Panhandle. So there'll be some additional, perhaps a half or inch of rain, and locally more in a few of the coastal mountains. But I want to talk about some winter safety. Ice safety is really important. The ice is 2 inches or less, stay off of it. You need about 3 to 4 inches of good quality ice to support a person to ice fish, and about 5 inches to support a small group or some ice skating. And then if you have a snow machine, you shouldn't really do that unless you got 6 inches or more, and then a car, maybe 9 or more inches, and a larger vehicle such as a truck, 12 foot of ice you want to have there for a minimum to allow for a mid-sized vehicle to safely be situated there. Now, staying warm, one thing is if you lose power in the wintertime, it's important to kind of hole yourself up in an interior room and allow to keep rooms that you're not using closed off to avoid wasting heat. Also, keep curtains drawn or have some sort of, maybe you put that plastic up to allow for some added heat loss protection. Also, wear loose-fitting clothes, sweaters, something extra clothing to stay warm. Eat and drink food and water to help provide your body with the energy and to stay warm and hydrated, even though you may not have power. And the other thing is to make sure towels can be placed around door cracks to help, again, any heat loss. And the other thing is if you're using a generator, any type of gas heated appliance there, be very careful that it's properly ventilated so you don't suffer from any type of carbon monoxide poisoning. And lastly, don't forget your pets, cats, dogs, or even livestock, even sled dogs. Even though some of them are very adapted to the cold weather, sometimes we get some really harsh, extreme cold along with winds, heavy snows or ice. Please bring them in, give them some extra food and water. Well, looking at the satellite imagery, you can see the white enhanced tops there east of Kodiak Island. That's that low that's beginning to spin up. It's on the south end of the occluded front. The main low is coming into Norton Sound, the south side of the Seward Peninsula. And then if you look back to the west, AKwx southwestward, there's another clump of clouds, and that is this potent area of low pressure that will be quickly moving through the Aleutians tonight into early Thursday, and the one that will produce high winds in the vicinity of Dutch Harbor on up through perhaps Cold Bay by later tomorrow into tomorrow night. So here is that low located near Kodiak Island, the secondary low with the main low that was the remnants of a typhoon. Is now moving in through Norton Sound and the south side of Seward Peninsula. The occluded front inland has brought moisture, slightly warmer temperatures when it encounters the colder air over the mountains, and in the interior, especially along Yukon River, precipitation is falling in the form of snow. That'll be the case tonight, but as that warmer air creeps a little farther inland up the Yukon Valley, look for precipitation, especially at lower elevations, to mix with and change to rain, including the Fairbanks area. And then finally out to the west, there's that low pressure system beginning to pass up just north of the Aleutians as we go through the day on Thursday, with the front passing through the eastern Aleutians, producing high winds. As a result, high wind warnings are in effect for Nikolsky and Dutch Harbor. And then that system will spin up a secondary low across the northwestern and north central Gulf as we go through Friday afternoon and Friday night, with additional rains spreading back up along coastal areas with snow in and along the coastal mountains extending up into the interior. That low will make its presence known there, especially as it moves, the center moves inland there in the southwest interior. So low temperatures Thursday morning. Lows will be a little warmer than they have been, upper 30s, lower 40s on the outer coast, and then south central areas. We'll see with the increased cloud cover temperatures, most areas staying above freezing with the exception of maybe the southeast corner there, Glen Allen toward the Elkan border. Highs on Thursday area-wide will generally be mid and upper 40s, slightly milder than some of the temperatures we've seen. And then Friday morning lows across much of the area, except for maybe a little further in toward the southeast interior. Talkeetna, Glen Allen can be down around or a bit below freezing. And then high temperatures on Friday, again, area-wide, generally in the 40s. A few coastal areas like Craig and Kodiak can be up around or just above 50. Across the Arctic coast there, lows will be below freezing, teens and 20s, up along as well as portions of the Brooks Range. Temperatures still below freezing there, central Yukon Valley on up toward the Elkan, but rising and staying above freezing up through the Seward Peninsula. And then Thursday afternoon, highs will generally be at or above 40 along the lower middle Yukon River, but areas to the north, especially the Brooks Range on up into the North Slope and Arctic coast, will have to struggle to reach the freezing mark, if at all. And then lows Friday morning will generally be in the 20s across much of the northern and eastern portion of the state, with lows generally around or just above freezing, especially back through the west, and high temperatures slightly higher along the Yukon River, generally around or just above 40, and otherwise 30s with some 20s there in the portions of the Brooks Range and North Slope. Finally, across the southwest interior there this morning, with that push of milder air, temperatures in many spots may not get down below 40, especially from Aniak down through Dillingham, King Salmon, with lows mid-40s out over the Aleutians. Highs Thursday afternoon will generally be well into the 40s with some lower 50s there along the eastern Aleutians and the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. On Friday morning, look for lows generally to be above freezing, even in the southwest interior coastal areas. Especially coming out along the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians will be in the lower to mid 40s, with highs Friday afternoon again back up in the 40s with a few 50-degree readings possible from Kodiak all the way down back toward Adak. So here is the temperature outlook going through October 12th through the 16th. Temperatures are expected to average a bit below normal across the state, with the best chance there across the Panhandle. And as far as precipitation, it may end up being a bit drier there through the western and central portion of the Brooks Range into the Seward Peninsula, with precipitation averaging a little above normal from southwestern areas around Cook Inlet all the way down into the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving along to your aviation weather, if you have a flight planned for the end of this week, Thursday into Friday, we've had a low pressure that was the remnants of a typhoon move onshore by Thursday morning into the Seward Peninsula. The occluded front has pressed inland into the central interior and weakened. The south end of that has spun up weak low pressure out over the northwest and north central Gulf. But the next weather maker is a low that's going to be passing north of the central and eastern Aleutians, just west of St. Paul and St. George. And with that, there will be some stronger winds associated with that particular system that'll lead to enhanced turbulence across portions of the eastern Aleutians and tip of the Alaska Peninsula. But look for pretty extensive IFR conditions Thursday morning up into the north central Gulf Coast, areas north of the Alaska Range along the Yukon River, back up through much of the northwest and west and southwest coast out over the Bering. Thursday afternoon, look for IFR conditions to overspread the Panhandle and continue across central and northern areas of the state and along the west coast, extending up into the Alaska Peninsula. And then as that low works its way into the southwest coast, it's going to spread IFR conditions back up through Cook Inlet, including Kodiak Island and the Kenai, Prince William Sound, and look for those areas of IFR to linger across the southwest and along the northern Gulf Coast into the Panhandle for Friday afternoon, with still areas of IFR along the North Slope and Arctic coast. Past conditions on Thursday, AKwx will be IFR, as will Adigan, as snows will continue up through that area along with lower ceilings. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, look for IFR conditions trying to become MVFR as we head into the afternoon. And for Rainy Pass, look for IFR conditions also transitioning to MVFR. And then Windy Pass will tend to be more MVFR north of the north entrance, but overall becoming from IFR to MVFR as we go through the day on Thursday, as will Isabel go from IFR to marginal visual flight rules. And then look for Mentasta to go from MVFR to IFR by Thursday afternoon and evening. Tanita will see some improvement, IFR to MVFR, as will Portage. And then for the Panhandle, the northern areas, Chilkoot and White, we'll see MVFR conditions deteriorate for IFR Thursday afternoon and especially Thursday night and into Friday morning. Freezing levels have come up out over the Gulf ahead of that weakening front, and a couple areas of low pressure back up to 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 feet. Freezing level generally around 3,000 feet over the southwest interior, and as high as about 6,000 feet along the central and eastern Aleutians. The greatest threat for icing will exist in three areas. First, out across the Panhandle between especially off of Haida Gwaii on up in through the southeast Panhandle between 10,000 and a flight level of 19,000 feet. Central areas north and west of the Alaska Range between 6,000 and 13,000 feet. And then with the next compact, stronger area of low pressure between 7,000 and a flight level of 18,000 feet, central eastern Aleutians on up into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. There is a coupled jet stream structure at 30,000 feet. We have one jet core with northwest winds out over the Gulf back toward the Kenai with winds up to 125 knots. And then we have the other segment that extends up in through the eastern Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula with southwesterly winds up to 125 knots. Coming down to nearer mid-levels, 9,000 feet, we see the low circulation west of St. Paul and St. George, and winds pretty brisk at that level, upwards of 50 to 75 knots through the eastern Aleutians. And as we bring that down farther, you'll see that across the eastern central Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, at 3,000 feet, we have winds of 50 to as high as 65 knots that'll be turning from the west to the west-northwest, and as a result, that is going to create a fair amount of turbulence. Some of that turbulence could be on the severe side. Also, there's that area out there between Vancouver Island along the British Columbia coast and the Panhandle that has some 60-knot winds out of the south-southwest. So the potential for turbulence is there on Thursday, some isolated severe turbulence along the British Columbia coast between Vancouver Island and the Panhandle, surface to 4,000 feet. Also across the southwest into the Alaska Peninsula, surface to 4,000 feet, and pretty good likelihood of isolated severe turbulence along portions of the eastern Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. So if you are able to get out, have a safe flight and always check the latest forecast and conditions.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's a dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the Northern Lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the Northern Lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, you know. It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, oh, you're elevated, levitating, you're lifted up, your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, we're now into the home stretch, and with your marine weather, we start with the sea ice edge. Recall, on October 1st, that was the date by which any ice that remained from last season would become multi-year ice, and anything forming since the 1st of this month is now considered the new season ice. And we are seeing some ice forming there up along the Arctic coast and extending down into little patches even into Kotzebue Sound. But we would expect some of the early ice up there in the Beaufort Sea will get kind of blown around a bit by the winds as we head through the next several days. Let's take a look at what we have coming up in the southeast. Winds will be picking up. Inner waterways, winds picking up 15-25 knots, as high as 30 knots. Ketchikan down toward Metlakatla, with the gust as high as 45 miles an hour, waves building to 10 feet. On the outer coast there of the Gulf, 35-knot gales from the southeast and waves generally 12 to 14 feet. On Friday, we'll see the winds come down a little bit. Inner waterways 15 to 20 knots, southeast to south, waves 3 to 4 feet. And then for the outer coast there along the Gulf, 30-knot winds from the south-southeast with waves 8-9 feet, but there are some stronger winds that'll be entering through the western half of the Gulf. Across south-central areas on Thursday, northwest winds 10 knots, 2-footers there in Prince William Sound, but winds will be picking up out of the west-southwest as you get out off the Kenai and in through the beginnings of Cook Inlet, 25 to 30 knots with waves of 6 to 8 feet. And then on Friday, low pressure will be attempting to develop there to the southwest of this particular screen down south of Kodiak Island. And with it, we do expect winds to try and turn more toward the east and then northeast and north, especially down through Cook Inlet, and picking up on in the order of 25 to 30 knots with waves off the Kenai up around 12 feet and generally 5 to 6 feet in both Cook Inlet and the area, the furthest out entries there of Prince William Sound. And then looking at the Kodiak Island, winds will be out of the west around 25 knots, waves 6-7 feet, but as you get out along the Alaska Peninsula, south and southeast winds will increasing to 30 to 40 knot gales with waves as high as 9 feet there north of Cold Bay on the Bering side. And then blast of winds come on through. We have 45 knot high-end gales to lower 50 knot storm force winds with higher gusts likely, waves building over 20 feet as you get offshore on the Pacific and Gulf side, and on the order of 20 to 25 feet just away from Bristol Bay, especially on the north side, the Bering side of the Alaska Peninsula. Thursday, we have the high wind warning in effect for Nikolsky and Dutch Harbor, and we are going to see 50 to 55 knot storm force winds with gusts potentially upward around 65 to near 70 knots, not out of the question. And waves will be building 12 to 20 feet there on the North Pacific side and 13 to 18 feet on the Bering side. As low pressure passes, the center passes around St. Paul and St. George, we will see the strongest winds on Friday shifting on eastward through the Alaska Peninsula. Still 50-knot winds possible early Friday around Dutch Harbor, falling off to 35-knot gales as you get back toward Adak, and 30-knot westerly winds around Kiska. And again, pretty potent storm system moving through there Thursday into Friday. And then on Thursday, across the west coast, we are watching an area of low pressure there in the vicinity of St. Paul and St. George. Ahead of it, 40-knot gales, waves building to 11 feet. Further north, winds will be westerly, north of Hooper Bay on up to Norton Sound, waves 4 to 5 feet. And then Friday, you can see that core of stronger winds riding up on the Bering side of the Alaska Peninsula up toward Bristol Bay, with winds from the west of 45 knots. And especially east of St. Paul and St. George, with waves around 20 feet. Winds as the low moves inland into the southwest interior around Bethel. It will cause winds to turn northeast to northerly there from Norton Sound down to south of St. Lawrence, with waves of 6 to 7 feet. And then finally along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the east-northeast 10 to 15 knots, more northeasterly to northerly through the lower Chukchi Sea along the northwest coast into off of Kotzebue Sound. Waves 3 to 4 feet there. And then on Friday, winds will be out of the northeast to north at 10 to 15 knots along the Arctic coast, waves a foot or two, and northeasterly 20 to 25 knots all the way down to the Bering Strait with waves of 5 to 7 feet.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.